Baylor, in my opinion. I do think that this is a team that will slip up at least one more time. I have Baylor making it through. And I think they're going to lose a game, which I think could prove detrimental in the end. But I think they lose a game and they win the Big 12. Oregon doesn't convince me, especially that defense. That defense against this offense, we could have such a high-scoring game. It would be unbelievable. Better than TCU Baylor.
All right. So if I heard you correctly, Baylor's going to win the Big 12, but the loss could end up costing them the college football playoff.
Yes.
All right, good to know. We move on with 3 games remaining, and let's be honest, one of them wasn't really a game. We've got 2 number 3 teams, because apparently there's ties now. Ole Miss versus A&M, and Auburn versus Mississippi State. Neither of these games were extremely close, to be honest with you. They were both extremely high-ranked teams, and the two Mississippi teams won. I mean, Mississippi is literally in football craziness right now. I mean, craziness. Both these teams have never been ranked in the top 10 at the same time, let alone the top 3. We'll go on to them more in our rankings later. But, geez Louise. Ole Miss beat A&M by 15. And it wasn't even that close. Mississippi State won by 15. And it was about that close, actually. So, here's the deal. Which win is more impressive? Mississippi State or Ole Miss?
I'm going to go Mississippi State. They beat the number 2 team in the country, a team that was in the college football national championship last year. And, of course, lost on a gaming drive. Of course, they did lose Trey Mason, but they still have Cameron Artis-Payne, and they're still a very good football team that has proven it so far this year. Ole Miss went up against a Texas A&M team that I think was a little bit overrated coming into this year. I would like to say to all the people out there saying, oh, Texas A&M is bad, they're just not a good team. Look at the 2 teams they lost against. Ole Miss and Mississippi State. Both great teams. Calm down with the Texas A&M sucks. Texas A&M has tough matchups. It's not easy when you have an inexperienced quarterback to go up against Bo Wallace, who has gotten a lot of work, and, of course, Dak Prescott.
All right, if I may, can we please cut the idea that Ole Miss is winning because of Bo Wallace? I'm sorry.
No, I don't think they're winning because of Bo Wallace.
I think he's honestly a little bit of a. He's not even. I wouldn't even put him at Jimmy McCarron. I would put him at Greg McElroy status.
I have him. I would say he's a top 10 high. I'd say he's top 7 right now for Heisman.
Yeah, but I think he's still Greg McElroy.
No, he's McElroy.
He's McElroy.
I guarantee you, if this was Bo Wallace of last year, this team wouldn't be nearly at the same point they are.
So he's improved enough. Plus, they've limited his passing.
Not enough.
You know what?
I think that is a very adequate comparison to Greg McElroy. He just does what he has to do, gets himself kind of in the Heisman conversation, but not really, and his team wins. I like that. That's good.
Yeah. Now the question is, do they have a recruit who happens to be A.J. McCarron and will end up dating another Catherine Webb? The world may never know. Well, we probably will, because if he does, we'll know. All right. That brings us to the final game of the thing, and we really should be moving on because it's been over half an hour now, and we are just recapping last week. Florida State beat Syracuse by 18. You know what? You shouldn't really be winning by 18 if you're the number 1 team in the country. Part of the reason why they're not number 1 team in the country anymore. But, you know what? They won pretty handily. Rip Syracuse. I mean, they're 2-4. I doubt they're even going to make a bowl. Poor Syracuse. I like Syracuse, too. I tend to enjoy Syracuse. Syracusean? Orangean? I don't know what you're calling them. The Men of Orange. That should be a thing. We should call them the Men of Orange. I really hope so. All right. Moving on to the rankings of the teams in the games. Currently, the AP top 10 is Georgia, Oregon, Michigan State, Alabama, Auburn, Notre Dame, Baylor, Ole Miss, Florida State, and Mississippi State. And Michigan State is at 6 in the other poll, which dropped, and Auburn is at 8. Those 2 teams flip-flop. in the coaches poll, but other than that, it's the exact same poll. So, all right, AP Top 25, US Today poll. Well, let's be honest, the only polls we really care about are our own. Noah, would you like to go first, or shall I?
I'll go first.
All right.
Okay, so we're starting at number 10. Number 10, you know what? I like this team. This isn't who actually should be ranked there, because I wouldn't rank them there. But this is my top 10 teams in college football. TCU at number 10. I think they lost that game. They lapsed mentally, but I still think this team is exceptional, especially offensively. Number 9, Oregon. They're still in it. They are going to need some losses still to move up. Number 8, Alabama. That game against Arkansas, they probably should have lost that game. I'm debating switching Oregon and Alabama as we speak, but I'll leave it. Number 7, Michigan State University. I still think this team is good. Tough week against Purdue. They are still going to have to run the table. Whether or not they can beat Ohio State remains to be seen. Number 6, Auburn. They lost to a great team. I don't think they shouldn't drop too far from that. Number 5, Baylor. I think Baylor is absolutely phenomenal. This team puts up tons of points, but there have been some games that have been too close, which makes my number 4 team, Notre Dame, who's struggling against UNC, but I think this team is a lot better than people think they are. I think Everett Golson is a great quarterback, and we'll get into Florida State Notre Dame later. Number 3, Florida State University. It's been really underwhelming for me. I can't put them at number 2. Sorry, Florida State fans. This team has been a disappointment so far. They have so much talent, so much athleticism, and it just hasn't shown up. Number 2, Ole Miss. The defense is crazy good. The 20 points they gave up against Texas A&M, it was 13 points garbage time. They dominated that defense or that offense of Texas A&M that looked so great earlier this year. Number 1, who else but Mississippi State, led by Dak Prescott. This team is terrific. Prescott is terrific. I cannot wait for Ole Miss, Mississippi State.
All right. Here's the thing. I've got a top 10 with some changes, I guess. I still have Georgia there because even though they lost Todd Gurley, they still crushed Missouri. And I think Nick Chubb is an adamant replacement. I think their defense is still fairly strong. My number 9 team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. I can remember their mascot. They were extremely underwhelming. Arkansas should have beat them. They did not beat Arkansas. Arkansas lost. They missed an. They had a blocked extra point, but they also fumbled on the goal line earlier in that game. I mean, it was just a bad game for them. I mean, Arkansas played really well, except for a couple of moments when they played awful. Then I go, and okay, my next 2 teams are Oregon and Michigan State, but I've got Oregon above Michigan State, basically on the facts that Oregon beat Michigan State, and therefore I think should be ahead of them. I don't think you can put them back to back and not have Oregon above Michigan State. Then we move on to Auburn, who is the top 1-loss team in my opinion, mainly because they lost to my number 1 team, which is also Mississippi State. We've got 5 unbeaten left. I do them a little different than Noah does. I've got Notre Dame at 5. They were unimpressive against UNC. They've been unimpressive against 3 or 4 teams now. I mean, they've had multiple close calls so far. We'll talk about Notre Dame more later with their Florida State game. But just to recap, I mean, they beat North Carolina by 7, a good Stanford team by 3, and then they had the Purdue game was close for a little bit even, and I mean they were close, but I don't know. It's close. It feels like this Dame team is going to have too many close calls for me. I've got them at 5. Then I go, and this could be controversial. I've got Ole Miss 4, below Baylor. I still think that I like Baylor more. I'm not even sure why. It's one of those things I just do. Then you go Baylor 3, Florida State 2, and the number 1 team in the nation, as I have previously said, is the Mississippi State something. I don't even remember now. They're the Mississippi State something. That's their official mascot. They're the Bulldogs, right? The Bulldogs. I almost wanted to call them the Rebels of Ole Miss. Should have done that.
I almost did that too, to be honest.
Yeah. All right. Those are our top 10s. We obviously disagree about a few teams, but we're roughly the same. Mississippi State's the best team. You can interchange a few teams, but we have the same. Our top 5 are slightly flipped around. But let's be honest here. The top 5 is, as long as you have them near that section, we agree those top 5 teams are the best teams. Those 5 best teams. And then we have only one different team in our top 10, which is I have Georgia, you have TCU, and those are both understandable reasons. They both played well, and they both played somewhat bad in certain games. Our biggest gap, though, is that I believe you had Alabama at 8, I had them at 7, I had Oregon 9, and you have those flipped, and then you have Michigan State above. Oh, I have Oregon 7, Michigan State 8, Alabama 9. I want to ask, so, especially because you said you were considering Oregon above Alabama, would you say that, my question is, if Oregon's back-to-back with Michigan State, do you have to put them? I mean, this is a win that was in, what, week 2? Do you think that Oregon has enough on their resume to be over Michigan State, or do you think that Michigan State deserves, because their recent play, in your opinion, has been better?
I think if it came down to a selection committee, people would pick Oregon based on their conference. However, I think Michigan State goes over them. I think the concept that because you beat a team, you should be ranked higher doesn't necessarily apply in most cases. I think you could look at a team that loses to Utah. If you lose to Utah, you're probably not worse than them, honestly, in the poll.
You're looking at a team that lost to Arizona, not Utah, because Utah.
I know, but I'm talking about if you lose to Utah. Utah's actually been pretty decent, but if you lose to a bad team, I thought Oregon should actually be better than Arizona, despite the loss. Personally, I think Michigan State has done enough to pull themselves back up there, especially because they haven't lost games, and I think at the end of the day, losses in conference hurt more than losses out of conference. And I think that's what puts Michigan State above Oregon.
Alrighty then. That brings the ranking section of our show tonight. Brought to you by nothing, because we have 0 sponsors.
Yay.
Alright, moving into the Heisman talk. Okay, I think top 5s are in order, I guess, but before we do that, there's a site I like to use, and it's called Heisman Pundit. And they take a straw poll, is what they call it. It's basically just picking a bunch of different voters from all around. And so this is their latest straw poll. This is from released today. And it has, and I'll just give you their top 5. So, and this is slightly different than I believe what both of us are putting up. And they only, I don't know exactly how many, they have 10 voters, which means it's a pretty small sample size. But the top 5, Amari Cooper and Bryce Petty are tied at 4th. Melvin Gordon is 3rd, Marcus Mariota 2, and Dak Prescott 1. This does leave out Bo Wallace, Everett Golson, those guys, and Todd Gurley, those all received votes. Those are different. On the number of ballots, Prescott and Mariota were on 9 each. Somehow people left them out of their top. I don't know if this is, excuse me, but I don't know if this is 3 or 5. I believe this is 3, though. We're going to give 5s. So, I know that my list is a little different than yours, but let's take a whack at it. All right, I will go first this time. Heisman. My 5th is kind of a dark horse. Tevin Coleman, Indiana, leads the nation in rushing. He's already over 1,000. He's been extremely impressive so far. He's running up a storm. Go Tevin. I basically think he's like Andre Williams last year was. You know what? He'll probably make if he continues at this pace, he'll make it to the Heisman ceremony. He'll get drafted in the 3rd round of the NFL draft someday, and he'll probably end up going to a bad team in New York. All right, my number 4, Everett Golson. He's been impressive. I was looking at his stats compared to Bryce Petty, and he's like I think he's one more touchdown pass on like 30 or 50 less attempts. Everett Golson's actually got impressive stats. I was a little surprised by that when I went in depth, but he's got pretty good stats. Melvin Gordon is the best running back in the country, and that's why he's number 3 on my list. He's been absolutely fantastic for Wisconsin. He's had 200 yards in a couple games. Their one loss came in a game. I think he had 240 or something like that. 200. I mean, it was ridiculous how many yards he had in a loss. My number 2 is Marcus Mariota of my Oregon Ducks. Been fantastic, and is a common number 2 in most polls. He's probably he's very in the he's in the conversation. Let's be honest here. He was impressive over UCLA. Not eye-popping stats, but eye-popping plays. And the Arizona loss, he was not bad. He was good in the Arizona loss. They lost on offensive line and defensive line. Then the number one, I don't know how you